Hey everybody, welcome back to another SAT math video. This is from the 2024 Test Bundle 6, Module 2. The table shows the linear relationship between the number of cars, C, on a commuter train and the maximum number of passengers and crew, P, that the train can carry. Which equation represents the linear relationship between C and P? So what are they asking us basically, right? They're basically asking us, can we define some function of the number of cars, and that function should basically output for us the maximum number of passengers and the crew, right? Because they're saying it's a linear relationship, right? And they're also giving us all the answers in terms of C and P, or in terms of like some function where we have a variable C and a variable P, right? And an important thing to note is we also want to identify which one of these variables is the independent and dependent variable, right? So they tell us that the number of cars, basically when you change the number of cars, right, you basically can have a differing number of maximum crew and passengers. Okay, so that tells us that this would right here is going to be our independent variable. What I mean by that is it doesn't really work the other way around, right? The maximum number of passengers and crew doesn't affect the number of cars, right? But rather, when you have more cars, you can increase the capacity of the passengers and crew, right? So this would be our independent variable, right? So this would basically be a function of the number of cars and how that relates to the maximum number of passengers, right? So also, since it's a linear relationship, right, we know that we can basically, if we were to plot this out on a graph in an XY plane, linear relationship simply means that it would be some line on the XY plane, right? So that also gives us another hint as to how we can solve this equation, right? So with that being said, if we know that this can be represented as a graph, right? Basically just a line, right? Not even graph, it would be represented as a line. Then we can use the properties of a line to try and figure out what the equation of this linear relationship or the equation of the line would be given these points, right? So they give it to us in terms of C and P, but really we can honestly think about this in terms of X and y, right? Because x would be our dependent variable. X is the value that basically determines what y equals, right? Because let's just look at our equation of a line in slope-intercept form, right? We have y equals mx plus b, right? We have some slope x, right? So every change in x times the slope is going to give us some y, right? And we also have the y-intercept, right? When we have slope-intercept form. So the first thing we ought to do is figure out maybe what is the slope, right? And that's pretty easy because we kind of already have a bunch of points that we can work with, right? So I'm going to basically find the slope using this point and this point, right? So we remember that slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, right? Okay, so we have our y2 and y1 right here. You can use any order, it really doesn't matter. I just like to use the bigger numbers as my y2 just because it makes your life easier. You don't have to worry about any converting stuff from negatives and negative numbers. It can get a little annoying to deal with. So I like to just use the bigger number as my y2 and x2, right? Or the bigger pair of numbers rather, right? So we have y2 is 284 minus 174 over x2, which is 5, minus x1, which is going to be 3. So that is going to simplify to m is equal to 284 minus 74. That's going to be, well, let's see, 4 minus 4, that's going to give us a 0 in the units place. 8 minus 7, that's going to give us a 1 in the units place. And then 2 minus 1, that's also going to give us a 1. So we have 110 on top, and then 5 minus 3 is 2. So then 110 divided by 2, well, that is going to be, let's see, 2 goes into 11 5 times, and then we have a 1 left over. So then 2 goes into 10 5 times, right? So that would mean our slope is 55, right? Now, I'm going to continue just doing this in terms of y and x, but notice that this 55, right? This 55 means what, right? That means basically for every car, right? One car can hold a max of 55 passengers, right? So we would know that the final equation, whatever that equation might be, let's just say function of passengers, right? F of p is going to have some variable c, where c number is the number of cars, right? And for every car c, we have 55 passengers, right? So uh, we know that these two answer choices then are wrong, right? Because they're giving us in terms of the number of passengers, right? There's not, for every 55 passengers, we don't get an increase in the number of maximum passengers. It doesn't really make sense, right? So we know that these two are instantly wrong, right? And these two are the only ones that describe the function in terms of the number of passengers per car, right? Because remember, we can pretty much accommodate based on the slope. We know that we can accommodate 55 people per car, right? 50, when you ever have a relationship, it's like, some variable per another variable, that means that is represented as multiplication, right? So we know that one of these two is going to be our answers, but now we need to figure out the rest of the equation and kind of see what the actual equation will be such that we know which one of these is the right one, right? So we usually, when you have a slope, that's not enough to find the full equation of the line, right? Because right now our line equation would be y is equal to 55x plus b, right? We don't know what this plus b is, so we need to figure out what that will be. And the way to do that when you have a slope and you need to find the y-intercept of a line is you basically just find a point, right? We know x and y. We can just substitute one value of x and y into our partial equation and then solve for b. So that is exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to substitute this first point, right? We have 174 as our number of passengers. In this instance, we're defining y is the number of passengers, right? So we're going to basically do 174 passengers is equal to some number b plus 55 times the number of cars, right? So we have 55 times the number of cars, which is going to be 3, right? So now we just need to simplify and solve for b, right? So 174 is equal to b, and then 3 times 55, well, that's kind of like 3 times 50, which is 150, and then we have 3 times 5, which would be 15, so that will be 165. Again, you can use your calculator in this section, so don't feel like you need to do everything in mental math. You can always use your calculator. And now we just need to isolate b, right? So if we have a plus 165, that means we're going to minus on this side. And then whatever we do on one side, we do to the other side. So minus 165 on both sides of the equation. That gets rid of that. So therefore, b is going to equal 174 minus 165. So let's just do that right here. We gotta borrow a 1 from here, so this becomes 6. 14 minus 5 is going to be 9. 6 minus 6, 0, 0. So b is equal to 9. So our final equation is going to be y equals 55x plus 9, or if written in terms of P and C, right, that means the total number of maximum passengers for any given number of cars is equal to 55 passengers times the number of cars plus 9 passengers. Now, you might be wondering, okay, we have this equation. How do we make it into one of these answers? Well, we just have to bring the variables over to one side and see which one, what our equation looks like when we do that, right? Because in the answers they give us, all the variable terms are on one side. So you just got a minus 55c on both sides, and then we get p minus 55 c is equal to 9, right? Still not exactly looking like any of the ones we have here. So maybe let's try moving it the other way around, maybe we can just instead do a -9 on this side, so a -9 on this side, so then we get p minus 9 is equal to 55c, right? So now our 55c is still positive, and then we can just minus p on both sides, right? So then what we're left with is going to be -9 is equal to 55c minus p. So now we have an equation in a form that is similar to the answer choices given. -9 is equal to 55c minus p. Only answer choice that is equal to that is right here. Answer choice A. So there you go. That's how we solve this one. What we did was first understand which of the variables are the independent and dependent variable, and that made it easier to find out the equation of the line in terms of y and x. Then we figured out the slope based on taking 2 points or two sets of values, pairs of values from the table, and then figuring out the slope. Once we had the slope, all we did after that was basically plug into the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, right? Y equals mx plus b. We plugged in a value of x and y, which we chose this one, and then we were able to solve for the y-intercept, which gave us this equation. Once we had this equation, we were able to rewrite it in terms of p and c and then find the right answer choice, right? Just a quick note on what the y-intercept would mean in terms of like this scenario. So perhaps when the y-intercept, right, is when the x value of a line is basically 0, right? So let me draw that a little bit. So we have some line here, right? Y-intercept is when the line intersects the y-axis. So what that would mean in this scenario is the number of maximum crew that could be on the train if there are 0 cars attached to the commuter train, right? So maybe that would basically say, okay, we know like in the engine room or the first car that pulls the train actually can only hold like 9 crew. That's kind of what you would what the y-intercept in this context would mean. Just kind of like more of like an FYI, not really super necessary to know when solving this equation. In any case, thanks you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any sort of comments or recommendations on how I can make this better, please let me know in the comments below. Also, check out Khan Academy. A lot of great free resources on Khan Academy for SAT and anything else if you are interested in self-study. As always, thanks for watching.